ahead and get started and just get us rolling, since time is a little of the essence. And I'll explain to you why I have a hard stop because of a special board meeting tonight. So I'll talk about that in just a minute here too. But thank you all for coming tonight. My name is David Nunez. If you haven't had a chance to meet me yet, I'm the interim head of school at Great River. I use he, him pronouns, and I've been here since July specifically. I want to give the other panelists an opportunity, because you may not know everybody else who's a panelist tonight in the meeting. So I want to give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. And there may be a few more joining us as we go on. But I think Tammy, the lower adolescent program director, is not going to be able to join us tonight, in case you're wondering. She wasn't able to join. But Stacy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Stacy Krieger. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Administration.
And Jean?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jean Peters. I'm the Elementary Program Director. I use she, her pronouns.
Adam?
Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Kohler. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Upper Adolescent Program Director.
And Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Flannery. I'm the school psychologist. I use she, her pronouns.
And Matt?
Hello, Matt McElrath. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm the Dean of Students.
And Lindsay?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay Harches. I'm the Assistant Special Education Director, and I use she, her pronouns.
Excellent. Thank you all. And Brad may also be joining us shortly. We'll see if he's able to make it. And like I said, Tammy is not going to be able to make it this evening. Excuse me. I wanted to start off by just saying a few things and then get into protocols for the meeting. So first of all, I wanted to start by saying that I believe, and I think everybody up here on this panel tonight believes, that Great River School is a safe place. We're all sitting up here today because we believe in this community and we trust in the systems that we have in this community to keep us safe. One thing I mentioned in my email, and I want to reiterate the idea that in this entire situation, we're trying to follow facts, not fears. I can't claim to have made up that phrase. Adam brought it to our group. Thank you, Adam. But the key here is that the fears feel overwhelming to us, and that overwhelming feeling is very real, but that the fear shouldn't necessarily drive the decision-making when we talk about everything that's going on. Protocols for the hour. We use the webinar format, as you can see, if you haven't already caught on, in part because there are just so many participants in these meetings. We already are up to about 90. This morning, we had about 140 or so participants. So we have pretty good turnout, and that makes for a hard thing to manage in terms of Zoom. But we are recording this session, and we're going to post one or other of the two recordings. Also, I want to say that because we're in a webinar format, we have at the bottom of your screen, you have a button that says Q&A, and we'd like you to manage Q&A. We'd like you to manage Q&A as a way to ask questions over the course of the meeting. And after I'm done talking, I'm going to talk for a little bit tonight. And when I'm done talking, you can use the Q&A to throw questions out to, and then Stacy is going to be our moderator of our questions and manage a little bit and make sure that, you know, we'll probably get some repeat questions and whatnot. I do actually have to say that I have a little bit of a hard stop tonight at 6:30, as the meeting is scheduled to go through 6:30, because there's a special board meeting tonight. You may notice that I'm sitting in the Upper Adolescent Commons. You may wonder why I'm sitting in the Upper Adolescent Commons at 5:30 at night. But because the school board meeting is potentially here in the Upper Adolescent Commons, there needs to be a member of the board who's present at all school board meetings according to open meeting law. So I'm here and I have my mask. If anyone else shows up, I think I'm the only person in the building right now. But that's why I'm here in this particular space at this moment. And the other reason we use the webinar format is to prevent any so-called Zoom bombing. We're able to control the nature of what everybody is seeing and interacting with a little more closely and carefully. I did also want to say that I've gotten a lot of phone calls and emails, even by GRS standards. I think that at GRS I get a lot of phone calls and emails from parents, which is great, and I try to get back to as many as I can, but it's been a tremendous amount recently. And so I'm doing my best to get back to everybody, but part of the purpose of this event is to fill in the gaps for everybody, including those who have written to me who I may not have had an opportunity to get back to yet. So if you're in that category and I haven't been able to respond to your email, I apologize. And I am doing my best to get back to all of you as quickly as I can. I'm going to speak for a little while tonight just to sort of fill in those gaps and answer those questions. And then you can add questions in the Q&A, as I said earlier, that function at the button at the bottom of your screen. How I want to start is talking about what we know. So of course we are closed today. And I want to remind you, we're closed today out of an abundance of caution. I think that we are being particularly careful by closing the school today. But what we know about the situation is this. Some student at the school, likely in the adolescent program, although we're not, we're pretty sure because of the location of the bathroom, threatened the school community through bathroom graffiti. They specifically threatened that something was going to happen, that a shooting was going to happen at Great River on December 6th, today, the day that we closed. It seems like this day holds some importance to this person, but we don't know because we don't know who this person is. So to be clear, we've been investigating this threat for some time. So the threat actually took place the week before fall break. And I know I haven't been necessarily clear about that before now, and I apologize. I found myself writing the email on Friday morning, very early in the morning, and did not include that information when I probably should have up front. But we did investigate this situation thoroughly for weeks now, and we have tried in every way we can think of, and we cannot figure out who actually wrote the graffiti. So I also want to be clear that we have no real reason to believe that the graffiti is connected to the recent protests at the school or the racial tension at the school. There's no reason to believe that there is a connection there necessarily. So what have we done? I want to speak first to what an investigation looks like at Great River. First of all, one of the things that an investigation might look like is we might review video footage. We do have video cameras around the school, and we do actually have a video camera that points down the hallway that this bathroom was in. However, what we know of on the day that the situation took place, over the course of that day, probably 100 kids came and went from that bathroom. So video footage in this case is not proving to be particularly helpful in this investigation. In fact, we've never caught anyone vandalizing the bathrooms through the use of video footage because the bathrooms are such highly trafficked locations. We've also spent time talking to students and staff. So we have a highly relational building. And so for our Dean of Students and his staff, for our Dean of Students and his staff to talk to students is like a key element of the investigation. We sort of keep our ears open. We have conversations with students that we might think are potential risks. We have conversations about, we keep our ears open for conversations about violence, about self-harm, conversations talking about guns in any way, and there just weren't any in the last couple weeks. And generally there aren't at Great River. This isn't an issue that we have encountered at Great River in the past. So another thing we do is we sort of keep our eye open for anything that might come up on social media. So more than ever this year, we're sort of keeping an eye on social media because it's such a major part of our students' lives, of course. And I think that's even more so true after the pandemic. But what that usually means is that we talk to students and students come to us and share their concerns about things on social media that impact the school day. And because they're impacting the school day, we investigate those things. And we treat those things as if they were an event that happened on campus in so many ways. Another thing that we do to manage and track any potential issues for students is that student email accounts are actually, to be clear, GRS email accounts are owned by Great River School. And so we're not going through and reading student emails and reading all the student emails, because I don't know who would obviously have time for that. But we do have a system that flags student emails when there are things of concern that come up on a student's email about violence, about harm to themselves or harm to another. And so we do keep a close eye on student emails with that in mind. And then, of course, one of the key things we do is that we have a really wonderful team of 4 social workers that have active conversations with students constantly around the building, and keep an eye out and keep an ear out for what's going on around the building. Now, I want to speak a little bit to what else we've done as well, beyond what the investigation looked like. But there's sort of a wide range here of different work that we've done in the past. So first of all, we annually conduct a review as a leadership team of our practices and procedures around building safety. So we have certain rules and expectations that we use around building safety, around physical safety in the building, first of all. So there's limited access to the school building. I'm sure all of you know, because you've all visited our school building, that we keep our front door locked and we have somebody who mans the front door. Other doors around the building that are able to be unlocked are also kept under camera and are managed by Holly at the front desk as well. And we keep certain points and locations around the interior of the building locked as well in order to manage security in the building. Staff members monitor and supervise areas such as hallways, workspaces. Student support services staff in particular are responsible, Matt and his staff are responsible for managing those spaces. Also, guests must sign into the main office. Staff members are instructed to report unfamiliar people to the school office. This happened once this year, where a parent walked into the building and didn't check in and wasn't thinking about it and just kind of walked in and had a place that they were supposed to be going, but hadn't checked in. And somebody immediately came to me, and I went and found that parent and had a conversation with them and explained what the protocol looks like. So we are very cautious and very careful about people that are entering the building. And then, of course, all of these strategies are augmented by the fact that we do have the video monitoring in our hallways that we use to make sure that our hallways are a safe place and to track behaviors after the case too. We also have crisis plans and prevention and preparedness training. So every year, our staff goes through a training around what lockdown procedures and other drills look like too. Fire drills, weather drills, things along those lines. A lockdown drill, which at our school is what we call it. Other schools have other names for it, certainly safety drills, or occasionally for a while schools were calling them active shooter drills, and that was decided that that was a little too traumatic a phrase, I think, for most schools to be using. But lockdown is pretty widely used at this point. And the research says that lockdown drills are very effective in terms of training staff to be able to do these actions at a moment's notice without thought. And also that a locked door keeps kids safe in a situation where a dangerous person is in the building. We know that that's the case. We know that it's probably the #1 way to keep kids safe when someone's in the building. So we have a couple different drills at Great River. First, we have what we call a stay in place drill. And a stay in place drill directs all students into classrooms and that all doors are locked. Any students who happen to be outside a classroom step into that classroom that they're nearest. And the attendance is taken and tracked to make sure we know where all the students are. But specifically, the teachers do, the guides do carry on with class, and the students are allowed to move freely within the room. Now, these are particularly useful drills to have on hand because it does come up that we want students out of the hallway because there's a situation going on in the hallway with another student, or and certainly this doesn't happen often, but what if we needed to get EMTs or emergency medical response into the hallway for some reason. We want to keep everyone in their classrooms and not moving from class to class and stationary. So there's a lot of different reasons why you might use a stay in place drill. And we do practice these at Great River. Then we have a building lockdown. A building lockdown looks a little different. Specifically, the main difference is everything looks the same as what I just said, except we move all the students away from internal windows and doors. And we don't practice this drill with the students in the past at Great River. We've chosen not to because I think a lot of the research and a lot of the what's considered best practice now is to support students in a way that doesn't feel traumatic to students. But the staff practice and get a sense and are trained on the specifics of what a building lockdown looks like, how we share with the staff that a building lockdown is happening, how that information gets communicated in multiple different ways, and what exactly to do when that information gets communicated. So there's a lot of conversations and training among staff related to this work. There's also a lot of conversations we've had around communication procedures to families, and I just want to throw this out there, that we text and call and email should anything happen in the building. We do have procedures and practices around that. And that the building leadership team regularly reviews crisis and emergency plans. All staff participate in an annual training, like I said already, and that includes all the different drills. And furthermore, we talk to teachers and other staff about how to respond to students and students' questions and how to support them in a crisis. So we've talked to staff about how to be present and supportive, even when they don't necessarily know all the answers. We've talked to staff about centering students' needs while being attentive and reassuring. And absolutely key, we have those 4 social workers in the building who support students directly, and Michelle, our school psychologist as well. So we also have some proactive school systems that I'd like to speak to for just a minute. So our school does provide school-wide behavioral expectations and norms for students. We use positive behavioral interventions and supports. We have psychological and counseling services. We have violence prevention programs, including social skills development and conflict mediation, like restorative justice and restoration practices at the school. And we promote compliance with school rules. We encourage students to report potential problems to the school. So what that means for students is that they're participants in this process too. We encourage students to take responsibility for their part in maintaining a safe school environment. So that is, in part, why we're having conversations tomorrow, these conversations tomorrow. We also have in place an anonymous reporting system that students can use a phone number or a Google form, and I believe we can text that phone number as well. We just found this out and tested this. But we've got this anonymous reporting system in place, and to be clear, we've gotten no anonymous tips either before or after the general announcement about this particular situation. But then beyond the review of policies and procedures and practices, all the different things we do in the building to keep students safe. In this particular situation, I've also been having conversations with the police, and I want to share that I've done that. I've spoken with the police several times, both in person in the building and also over the phone. They know about the threat. They know about all the details of our investigation. They questioned me on our practices thoroughly and got all the details. They are confident, and the phrase they used was that they were confident that in 99.9% of situations like this, absolutely nothing will come of it. And so what they are doing is that they are willing to be more available and more present in the vicinity of the building for the coming days. And that's what they believe, my understanding is that they believe is necessary in this situation. We also do some violence prevention programs specifically. I spoke a little bit already about restorative justice and restoration, but we do specifically teach students alternative to violence, including peaceful conflict resolution and positive interpersonal relationship skills. Now, I want to take just a minute and I'd like to speak directly to the students who may be in the audience. At this point, we're at about 117 attendees, and I can assume many of them are families attending, family groups. And we had mentioned that maybe the youngest students shouldn't participate in tonight's meeting because of everything that we were going to be sharing, but I'm sure some of our older students are out there. And so I just want to say a few things to them specifically. I want to say, first of all, that I believe, and I think everyone on this panel believes, that our school is a safe place. Our school staff works with local police, fire departments, emergency responders. We do this work to keep you safe. So why is our school safe? Well, we all play a role in school safety. And that means that staff have a whole bunch of responsibilities like the ones I just went through, but it also means that you can help as a student at the school. You can be observant. You can let an adult know if you hear something or if you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable, nervous, or frightened. There's also a difference, just to be clear, between reporting and gossiping. So if you come and report to us that you are uncomfortable for some reason, that is absolutely the right thing to do. Sharing information amongst your peers in a way that may spread rumors can be really problematic and cause more problems than it necessarily solves. So I do encourage you not to gossip about situations that might come up, but to report to an adult in the building. Although there's no absolute guarantee that something bad will never happen in our building, it's important to understand, I think, the difference between the possibility of something happening and the probability that it will affect you or the school. So this type of senseless violence that we see on TV and that we hear about in the news is super hard for all of us to understand. And the key thing to remember, I think, is that sense of probability versus possibility. So yes, I can't say that there is never a possibility something bad will happen, but we know that the probability that something bad will happen at GRS is extraordinarily low. And we know that the strategies and practices that we use at GRS to keep you safe will help prevent those things and help keep you safe if something was to happen. Violence is never a solution to our personal problems. I know that many students have heard me say that in the past, but I really do mean it. Students can be a part of the positive solution by participating in anti-violence programs at school and conflict mediation, build those skills, participate in restorative justice and restitution, and letting us know if they have a peer who's struggling with anger, depression, or other emotions that they can't control. One question that I've gotten from a number of parents recently is about what our original plan was last week. And I want to be really transparent about it because we were not planning initially on sending an early morning Friday email and communication. The plan was to focus on supporting students on Friday and concluding the investigation that we've been thoroughly working on for 2.5 weeks at that point. And the idea was that we would work with students, our social work team would work with students when students became aware of the situation, that we might hear more information, that something else might come out and that might get reported to us as well as a secondary reason. But the key was to try to keep students centered in the process and try to help students navigate through the situation in a way that helped them feel safe at school. When the information became public knowledge on Friday morning, and we realized that we couldn't really manage how we were talking to students about it because it had become public knowledge, I decided to move up the release of the email for the sake of full transparency. But I promise that nothing was being swept under the rug, which is a phrase two parents used with me in emails, that nothing was being swept under the rug, but rather we were really trying to center the well-being of the children and how the information was released. And that plan was designed not just by the leadership team, but also with support of the school social workers and the school psychologists. So I do want to remind you at this point in the conversation that we are talking about a piece of bathroom graffiti, and we have no suspects and no other evidence at the time. And all of our students and all of us are dealing with a lot of trauma right now. And so there's a lot of that fear and anxiety that gets easily triggered right now. Again, we should follow facts and not fears. I would hazard to guess that a lot of schools, should something like this happen at, and in my experience in other schools and during my internship as a principal in other bigger schools, I would hazard that if something like this happened, they probably would not have a meeting like this. They may not even shut the school down for it, but we wanted to take it seriously. And we wanted to treat the investigation very seriously, and we value transparency, and we wanted to emphasize caution while valuing that transparency. Something like this has not happened at Great River in the past, to the best of my knowledge, and to anybody else that I've spoken to on the leadership team's knowledge as well. But we are in unprecedented times. And so we're dealing with the situations as they come up and the challenges as they come up. Finally, before we move into the Q&A session this evening, I wanted to speak specifically to what Tuesday will look like. So a couple things that have taken place is, one is that staff has been reviewing what a lockdown would look like were we to move into a lockdown on Tuesday for any reason whatsoever. We're also planning on having a greatly increased presence in the hallways, staff and admin and all staff, guides, being very present and on high alert and aware of what's going on around the school. But we do want the school to continue its structure and the kids to continue their school day, because regaining some sense of normalcy, we believe at this point, is good for everyone. So we will be offering students a time to process and learn, and to a space to speak to us about this situation though. So we won't be just coming back tomorrow and pretending like none of this ever happened, but at the same time, we want to offer students the ability to move through their day in as normal a way as possible. You will be receiving, I believe, in a short order here, some communications from the program directors, or may already have received them. They're planning on communicating with you more directly through email, depending on the age of your student. And they're planning on both sharing some plans for tomorrow and also further resources and materials on how to talk to your kids about all of this. How to manage those conversations and how to support your students through this experience. So at this point, we'll move into the Q&A session of the meeting. Again, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And Stacy, as I said earlier, will be our moderator. If we don't get to all of our questions tonight, that may happen though, especially since we do have that board meeting starting at 6:30. If we don't get to all of our questions tonight, we will record those questions and we will try to get answers out to the community in as timely a way as possible, and as soon as we are able. So I just wanted to have said that up front as well. All right. Also, other people on the panel tonight, other members of the leadership team and Michelle are here to help answer those questions as well. So I encourage all of you to jump in as you are able or see fit as we go through the questions tonight. So, Stacy?
I am going to try to group like questions. So if I skip a few and come back around, that's what I'm doing. I'll try to get to everything I can. If a comment comes in that isn't an actual question, I will not be reading it. So please put questions into here. If you put a comment in, other folks that are in this meeting can view the comment, but we won't read them out loud. Okay, so there's a few questions about the timing and the communication. So why did you choose to tell the community about the threat 2 weeks after you discovered it? Why wasn't it brought up to families earlier? Was there concern about parent reaction? And someone else asked a similar question and said that the last minute sort of communication seemed to contribute to anxiety.
I can see that makes a lot of sense. One thing I'd like to say about the timeline, a couple things, and I don't mean this to sound like I'm making excuses in the least, but an investigation of this magnitude certainly takes time. And we're talking about a time period in which we had a very short break, a very short week for fall break, and also a series of other things happening around the school that were very significant and were taking a lot of time and effort, and the staff was putting a lot of energy and attention. Not that they weren't putting energy and attention into this situation, but they were putting energy and attention into a lot of situations simultaneously. So what I would say about the time frame is that's how long the investigation took. And we hoped with the release of the information, we never intended to be withholding information from families, but we hoped with the release of the information that was another step in the investigation too, that, you know, as we make the community publicly aware of what's going on, that we might be able to, more information might come out. A student might say, oh, I heard about this, or I have a friend that I'm worried about, or whatever it is. So the process was something that we talked quite a bit about and thought quite a bit about. And as I said, the threat itself specifically targets this date, December 6th. And so we were specifically prepping and getting ready leading up to this date. So that was the thought and logic behind when we shared and how we shared. And also, like I said earlier, really centering the students in the process, trying to support them through navigating their feelings and trauma and emotions around what would be going around in the building as soon as we did make it public. So
I might just build off of what you just said, David. And you said, you know, you made the point that December 6th was the date that was targeted. And based on the information from the investigation, there hadn't been any other pieces of information to indicate any other day was a day of concern. There wasn't any other credible pieces of information to warrant any other day being closed. And I also know that if that information had emerged during the investigation, then the administration team and crisis team would have worked very quickly to make sure that that information got out. So it's just, I think it's really important for everybody to know that we have a group of people, myself included, our social workers included, who are trained in threat assessment, and we are always gauging the information as it comes in. And like David says, balancing that psychological safety with the physical safety piece.
A related question, was the plan always to close school on Monday when we were going to talk to students about the why on Friday, or was the group feeding just going to be discussed on Friday with no plan to close on Monday?
The plan to close on Monday was finally decided on literally shortly, a few days before that, before the closure. And that was in part because we didn't know if we were going to find something out. You know, if we had gotten a suspect, if we had had a student come forward and admit that they had done it, it wouldn't necessarily have translated into a school closure. But it wasn't an absolutely last minute, Friday morning at 6 a.m. decision. It was a decision that morning to release the information earlier than we had planned, but we already had a plan at that point to close school on Friday.
Yes, and I think Amy and Nick, that answers your question as well, about whether or not we had planned to tell parents at all. It was always intended that we were going to tell people.
Absolutely.
I'm going to jump in here too, because the elementary program, the timeline was a bit different. There was no intention to talk to elementary children on Friday, because we were going to communicate with families and have families talk to their children over the weekend. We did end up talking to the elementary children that were at school on Friday, but the original plan was to have that conversation start at home.
True. Sorry, sometimes I conflate elementary and adolescent. The plans were very different based on their developmental level.
There's a few questions about who reported the graffiti. Did a student or staff member report it? Is it possible to narrow down who had been in the area at the time closest, like to help do the investigation?
Yeah, we did look at a number of different things, including, like I said, that we do have video footage of the hallway. And the initial report, I believe, was shared by a staff member. Matt can correct me if I'm wrong here. And we know that several students were aware of it as well, and a few parents who reached out to us when their students told them about the graffiti initially. So there were people that saw it, but like I said, as far as the video footage goes, we're talking about dozens, if not 100 students in that space over the course of that day. We found out about the graffiti at the very end of the day, and don't know when it actually happened over the course of the day. And as soon as we found out about it, we went and had it removed from the wall. So we acted very quickly as soon as we discovered that it was there. Some of the other things, another piece that came up at the previous meeting this morning, someone asked about identifying handwriting. And so I just bring up that, the investigation did include a wide range of, different techniques to try to figure out who this potential student was. We were not able, because of the nature of how it was written, to identify handwriting or anything along those lines. So we did talk about all those different ways that we could potentially identify who it was.
What will happen if you found out who it was?
It's a really excellent question. I think a couple things. So it's hard to say exactly, because we don't know as much information as I'd like to know from that person. If that person was to come forward and tell us that they had done it, I think that might look different than if it gets reported to us by someone else. I think there's two things to balance when you think about what might happen to a student who made a decision to do something like this. There is the fact that we are talking about a threat to our community, a terroristic threat to our community. And so we have to take that very seriously. And that does mean there are consequences to someone's choice to have made this threat. At the same time, we also take and hold very seriously the mental health and the needs of somebody who might have made the choice to do this. And so what that means and what that looks like depends pretty heavily on why someone might have made the choice to do this. Did they think it was a joke, and it was a very poor joke if they thought that, but did they think it was a joke, or was it a cry for help, or were they very serious about it? It's hard for us to know until we start talking to that person, but support of that person as a potential cry for help, as somebody who would need additional support, all sorts of additional supports in order to manage whatever's going on with them, would be an important element to what would happen as well. And I think that those two things, the sort of discipline side of things and the support side of things, would have to be balanced and thought through depending on how it plays out. Yeah.
There's a couple questions about heightened security measures. One parent says they'd like to see metal detectors at the entrances and bag checks. In the meantime, how can we help kids feel safe so they can focus on learning?
Sure. So we did talk, we talked as a leadership team. We discussed a range of different possibilities, like metal detectors and bag checks. We had one parent or two parents, I think, asked me about whether or not students would be, physically searched as they entered into the building. There are some things we can't do. We can't be frisking students. We're not trained or qualified, or would it be legal for us to be searching students' persons like that without probable cause or whatever, or without police presence. What we have been concentrating on, to be honest, is that we have a lot of things we do to keep students safe in the building. We're a very small community compared to some larger schools that use things like metal detectors. And we are a very relational community. And so the work that we want to do is around supporting students and building those relationships and having students feel trusted. And that includes having students feel trusted to come and talk to us when they have a concern, or if they're having issues themselves in their lives. And the concern about potentially doing bag checks or searches of students is how that might impact those sorts of relationships as well. Anybody else want to jump in and respond to? We did talk about it pretty extensively as a leadership team.
I might jump in here too. Thanks, David. You touched on a lot of important points. And I'm going to just take a minute to mention that myself and Stacy Krieger have participated in something called Prepare Training, which is offered by the National Association of School Psychologists. And it is a crisis prevention, response, and preparedness training. It's a national standard, and it's done, across the country. One of the things it really emphasizes, and I've mentioned this already, is the balance between physical safety and psychological safety. And the physical safety piece, I think, is what we all think of immediately when we feel threatened, when we feel, when there is a situation like this and a school threat. But what we should also keep in mind is that there are a lot of protective factors that are put in place based on the culture and community at Great River School. And that's that psychological safety piece. David talked about this already, and the fact that we are a smaller school and that we have a really robust social services, social work team, and a well-connected teacher and staff group is that we, for the most part, know every student in the building. And that doesn't mean, and your students also know staff. That doesn't mean they love all their teachers. That doesn't mean that we're best friends with them. That means that we know what's going on with people most of the time. Of course, we can't know everything, but that is a protective factor that's every bit as important as all of the physical pieces. Like David said, the schools that are larger, really, hundreds and hundreds, or thousands of students, they aren't able to have that staff to student ratio. They aren't always able to have the connections that we have cultivated at Great River School. And so that is a time when things like metal detectors might be appropriate. But with our school culture and community, that isn't something that would make anybody safer. And it would most definitely make a lot of students feel less safe. So I just wanted everybody to know that these decisions also come from a really well prescribed policy and procedure and training.
Were there any images taken of the threat, and if so, will they be made public?
Not planning on making them public. I can tell you about the threat. Like I said, there were not a lot. It's not a extensive amount of text, and the words are written in sort of different fonts, for lack of a better phrase. It basically calls out that we should be wary on December 6th, and then has a picture of a person shooting a gun specifically. So that's the gist of what the graffiti looked like. It was simple and yet still something to be taken seriously, disturbing enough that we decided to take it seriously. So.
My child is also really concerned that the staff is not making enough effort to stop this threat since the student feels like the hate speech was not treated appropriately. What's your plan for restoring trust between staff and students?
Absolutely, good question. So I know that I hear that from students a lot, that issues around hate speech in the past, issues around hate speech so far this year have not been handled in a way that that students would have liked it necessarily to be handled. A couple things I'd reiterate about that. I mean, we could have a whole meeting on that specifically, I think. But a couple of things I would say about that is that there are a range of things that we can and cannot say. We can say certain things about what we do and how we act on given information, but we can't talk about an individual student or talk about what decisions were made in terms of disciplining a particular student. So there are disciplinary things that have gone on and are ongoing related to these things. But there's also a lot of long-range planning that I've been talking with students about policy work. I just met with Equity Alliance Minnesota on Friday to have some conversations about the upcoming equity audit and upcoming equity audit at the school, and what that might look like, an opportunity for an outside observer to come into our school and talk to students and hear what they have to say. hear what they have to say about issues like this, such as the hate speech issue and the racial tensions that have been going on recently. So there's definitely steps that we're taking, and yet they don't happen instantaneously. And I don't mean to say that defensively, but there's a range of responses that we're trying to make. And one of them is trying to be more transparent. So trying to tell students, everything we can about what's going on, and talk to students about how situations are being handled as best we can, in order, I think students feel like if they don't know what's going on, why would they believe anything is going on necessarily? And so I think that there's a lot of work to be done there.
Sorry, there's a lot of questions. I'm trying to sort them a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this was a good question. So it's kind of a long one, but I can see there's a lot of focus on timelines and response and timing of communication. This parent wonders, how have ongoing policies adjusted moving forward, if at all, rather than just short-term heightened adjustment? Unfortunately, gun violence is a reality in our world. Have there been adjustments to our policies and procedures for good now that we've identified and named the reality of the world we and our children live in? Or has Great River chosen to keep policies and procedures as is with added hall monitoring for a week or so?
Excellent question, and super well articulated too. I do think that we, regularly review policies and practices around this work, and I do think that this particular situation has brought it very immediately to our attention and to our minds. And so, do I think that there will be changes in the long run to policy and practices? I do, actually. I do think that there are areas where we could use improvement. For example, the creation of what some schools refer to as a reunification plan. So if something was to happen in the school, a very specific plan, we have plans, but a very specifically articulated and written out plan on what reunification of families after a terrible situation might look like. So I do think that there will be long-running implications and long-running impacts of this work that we're doing right now today. I don't see how there couldn't be. Yeah. Anyone can add to that, certainly, if they have any particular examples.
What leads you to believe it was not connected to the hate speech and fighting incidents? What do you anticipate the increased police presence will look like?
So we don't know that it wasn't, we just don't know that it was. We have no evidence either way that it was connected to the hate speech or the fight a couple weeks ago. It does seem like time-wise that this was happening before some of that or during some of that, but during the early phases of some of that things that were going on. So it's hard to say exactly, but we certainly don't have any evidence that it is connected. And so it's just sort of, I'm not precluding the possibility, but I would want some evidence first. In terms of increased police presence, right now the police are going to be more in the vicinity of the school, but not like patrolling the hallways, just to be absolutely clear. When I say that the police have offered to increase their presence in the vicinity of the school, I mean doing drive-bys of the school and being very in closer vicinity and ready to respond at a moment's notice should anything happen and should we call them.
I'm just going to tell us we have 10 minutes left. And so if we don't get to your question, I will copy them and I have a place where I'm keeping track of them. So we will sort them after the fact and work on communication later. David, what's the plan for communicating? And maybe this is a program director answer too. The plan for communicating with the students about this situation. What will it look like, sound like, feel like?
That does feel like a little bit of a program director, not to call you guys out, but I think that it looks different at each level. And so it looks very different at each level. Even within levels, the lower elementary and the upper elementary are going to look very different. So I do invite Adam or Jean to jump in here and add anything that you might like to add.
Sure, I can go first. So Tammy's not here, but I can sort of speak generally to the way that the upper adolescent program is going to be responding is very similar to the way the lower adolescent. So students meet in the LA program, they meet in their advisory in the morning, and in the UA program, they meet with their indie work, or there's a couple classes that meet as well. And the very first thing that students will be doing is going through some information. So very similar to this meeting, just making sure that everyone has shared information. I would assume that most students know why school was closed on Monday. They should have read their emails, they should have talked to other people, but just in case, we want to make sure everyone has all the details so they know what we know as a school and what we don't know. And then doing some processing about how are you doing with that information? That's a lot of information to take in as a young person. So what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Reiterating the safety measures that are already in place at school, and then re-emphasizing the things that we're going to be doing this week, including more adult presence in the hallways, and those sorts of things that were already mentioned at this meeting. And also availability of social workers and student support people all day. I plan to cancel all of my regular meetings this week and just be available in the hallways so that if a student needs support, that I can be available. That's going to be very similar to what's happening in the lower adolescent program as well. School is as normal in terms of our class schedules, but that very first thing in the morning, we'll be meeting with students, going through a slideshow to share information and talk about what our plan is for this week. I'll pass it over to Jean.
You're going to receive a document from me just after this webinar that will give you a lot of details about what your child can expect at school tomorrow. Our youngest students in lower elementary will have a regular start to their day. They will go into their classroom and start their work. If there is a need to gather students together who have questions, we will support that, but there will be no all community meeting to discuss this in lower elementary. In upper elementary, they will start with a brief community meeting, similar to what Adam was saying, just to check in with students. We know that they have more questions in upper elementary. And then there will be an optional additional check-in time if students would like to have some more time to process. Myself, Tina, and Salaha will also be available to come in and talk to students and to support students. So you'll be receiving all the details shortly.
What will support and communication look like for students who are quarantined?
Elementary currently has one classroom quarantined, and they will do it's an upper elementary classroom, so they will follow the same procedure as the other classrooms, except it's going to be virtual.
What makes oh, go ahead, Adam.
To speak to that for the adolescent program, the number of students in the upper adolescent program is fairly small who are quarantining right now. So reaching out individually to those students.
What makes you think that December 6th was the important day? It doesn't seem like we can count on that date being significant.
We don't know exactly. What we know is that the threat itself said December 6th. And so we don't know why that date holds significance to the person, but that is where the credible threat seems to lie, is that December 6th was a date of importance to whoever wrote it, when they wrote it. It's very specific and it's very particular. Yeah.
There's a couple questions asking, like there's some students perhaps that are scared to come back to school and thinking about leaving our community because they're scared, and what are we going to do to support them and bring them back? I think that's summarizing a couple, but I can't find that exact one, but I know it's in there.
Yeah, I'll speak to this, David. I saw a few of those questions in there, and I think that the advice that we give families that have children who might have a higher level of anxiety, pardon my dog barking in the background, is that the best thing to do is to encourage and support them to getting to school. And the things that we can set up would be more like, maybe they might feel good about meeting with a social worker when they arrive at school, or different kinds of things like that. But we really want to encourage them to get to school, you know, as often as possible. Particularly like if they don't go to school on Tuesday, will it be hard to go to school on Wednesday? And I, you know, it's difficult to say anything more than that, even if they're worried and they want to leave the community. I mean, you know, I think it's really important to get them back into the building. And if there are specific, you know, families that need support or want to talk through this, I'm available for those conversations, as are our specific social workers for different our different levels. So that is what I would encourage.
I agree. I think that our social workers are there to support students at every level, and we'll be doing quite a bit of work on this front. And also, as I keep saying, I don't mean to be a broken record, but I do believe that GRS is a safe place. And I do think that everyone up here tonight believes that GRS is a safe place. If we didn't believe it was safe for you to return to school tomorrow, we wouldn't be having school tomorrow, because we're dedicated primarily to your safety.
I think we talked about this in the morning webinar, so I think we can address it here as well. Is there any online option for school right now?
So the move to online is complicated because there's some legal things around it. Really, we're just supposed to be offering online schooling to students who are quarantined. If a student was not in school on Friday or is not in school on Tuesday, I think there is, you know, Schoology work that can be done. There is those sorts of opportunities. And also, it is very difficult for a teacher to be managing a class and simultaneously running a full online distance learning sort of experience. So will there be work that students could be doing for time they may have missed on Friday, for instance? Yes, of course, there will be things that they could work on. And also at the same time, we don't have capacity to run an online school at the same time as running our school.
We have 2 more minutes.
Maybe one more question.
Sure. It's hard to pick one, so I'm going to do it kind of randomly. So sorry if yours doesn't get picked right now. We are concerned about our already stressed students and the general level of community stress. What plans does GRS have to ensure that there's adequate support at all levels, specifically in the adolescent, and fill any open positions, especially in special education?
Did you want to speak to that, Lindsay?
I can speak directly to the special education component, but just knowing that, like, for any available positions, we post as soon as we know that they're an available position. And so we have been reaching out in many avenues to seek out staff, and we really have a very small number of open spots right now. And so we're doing everything we can as a administrative team to reach out through different avenues to fill any spaces that are available. And so we're in that process right now for an open spot, and then we'll be notifying folks as soon as we have that position filled. And so we'll certainly be in touch as we know more.
And I can add to specifically the part about building trust and building it's a stressful time. And I've heard from several staff members and from students as well that it feels like because we didn't go on the trips, that there's just something missing. I don't know that I'm fully convinced that the trips makes or breaks what our community is, but it's definitely something that has felt like we've been missing. And so we are going to, in the upper adolescent program, going to try and make some more intentional efforts to build more community at school as we're able, given COVID precautions, and start making some intentional plans to try and do some sort of key experience, something. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but providing some more opportunities for students to build community in other ways besides just classrooms.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah. So we really are just out of time. And I do want to say thank you all for coming tonight. And as we said earlier, if your questions didn't get answered, we will do our best to collect those questions and answer those questions as best as we can. And I do appreciate certainly everybody who reaches out to me, and I do my best to get back to people as quickly as I can. So do feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, concerns, or comments, and I will do my absolute best to get back to you. I know that this is a scary situation. It's the stuff that's, you know, as educators and parents, that nightmares are made of. And yet at the same time, we can't lead with those fears, right? Like we know certain facts about the situation, and we believe that we have a very safe school environment, and that we're ready to be back tomorrow, and that we're ready to have students in the building in a safe way. So I'll conclude with that. I hope you all have a great evening. And like I said, do feel to reach out to us if you have any specific questions. Thank you so much for coming tonight.